When we think of a carnival, we imagine bright lights, thrilling rides, and laughter. But what if behind this facade lurked something sinister? Imagine a carnival that appears suddenly in forgotten parts of town and vanishes just as quickly as it came. Those who go there seeking fun might never return. Today we will tell you about 3 people and their friends who became victims of the night carnival. These stories will make you think twice before visiting such places. No one knows what happened to those who crossed the threshold of this eerie carnival, and today you will find out why it's a place you should never return to. Our stories start differently, but they all share one common thread: a carnival that appears out of nowhere, luring people in with its lights and transforming their lives into a nightmare. In each of these stories, the characters find themselves trapped, facing something inexplicable. Can you muster the courage to watch until the end and discover what happened to these people? Keep the lights on, because the night carnival could appear in any town, and no one knows who it will take next. The first story happened to Jason, Matt, and Laura, 3 best friends looking for adventure. The carnival appeared suddenly on the outskirts of their town, and they decided to head there for the evening. No one in town had heard of this carnival before, and its sudden appearance seemed odd, but the friends brushed it off. Jason joked that it was just some new marketing gimmick, while Laura, though uneasy, followed along. When they approached the gates, a masked man greeted them, silently pointing towards the ticket booth. A strange atmosphere lingered from the moment they entered, but the bright lights and music quickly distracted them. They bought tickets and stepped inside, unaware that this was the beginning of their personal nightmare. The first attraction that caught their eye was the giant Ferris wheel. It was old and creaky, but the friends decided to take a ride. Jason jumped in first, followed by Matt and Laura. As the wheel slowly lifted them higher, they relaxed, enjoying the view of the night-lit city. However, when they reached the top, they realized something was wrong. The city was gone. Below them, there were no longer any city lights, only an endless expanse of darkness. The carnival was the only source of light. Their carriage had stalled at the top and panic set in. Jason tried to call for the operator, but it seemed as though he had vanished. The carnival stood still, the music faded, and they were left in ominous silence. After what felt like an eternity, the Ferris wheel began to descend, but instead of returning to the ground, it brought them to a completely different place. The friends found themselves in an abandoned field. The carnival no longer seemed bright and cheerful. It looked decrepit and threatening. All around were broken tents and destroyed rides. They wandered, trying to find a way out, but no matter how far they walked, they always ended up back where they started. The Ferris wheel became the symbol of their endless loop. Time seemed to stand still, and fear began to take hold. Laura cried, begging Jason to figure out how to escape, but no one knew what to do. Even Matt, usually calm and collected, started to lose control. At one point, they thought they saw figures in the distance, shadows moving in the dark. Jason called out to them, but the shadows did not respond. Soon it became clear these weren't people. The figures began to move closer, their shapes distorted and terrifying. In a panic, the friends ran, but the shadows pursued them, as if playing a cruel game. Jason, Matt, and Laura were trapped in the carnival, which had transformed into an endless maze of fear and despair. They had no idea how much time had passed, but their strength began to wane. Eventually, when they were on the verge of giving up, they saw one of the carousels. Laura ran towards it, but the carousel started turning on its own, and the shadows reappeared from the darkness. In a chilling realization, Jason understood that the shadows were the souls of those who had also been trapped in the carnival. They were condemned to eternal existence in this twisted place, unable to escape. The friends realized they too had become part of the carnival, and there was no way out. The second story happened to Thomas, Mike, and Sarah. Like many others, they heard about the carnival and decided to visit it at night, seeking some fun. Thomas, always brave and determined, was the first to suggest going, never suspecting it would be the worst decision of his life. When they arrived, the carnival already seemed suspicious. The lights were too bright, and the carnival workers had eerie smiles plastered on their faces. Still, they ignored their instincts and went inside. The first attraction that caught their attention was the Hall of Mirrors. The maze was large and confusing, but at first it seemed normal. They laughed at their distorted reflections, making silly faces and trying to find one another. But soon everything changed. Thomas lost sight of Mike and Sarah, and the mirrors around him began to show strange reflections. His own reflection started moving independently. It smiled at him, then slowly stepped towards him. Horrified, Thomas backed away, but his reflection distorted, turning into a monstrous figure. He called out to his friends, but no one answered. The mirrors began showing him scenes from his past, memories he'd rather forget. Thomas saw the time he lost his younger brother in the woods as a child, saw the arguments his parents had, and with each step forward, the mirrors grew more terrifying. He was surrounded by his worst nightmares with no way out. Eventually, one of the mirrors cracked, revealing a passage. On the other side, he saw Mike and Sarah, but they were no longer themselves. Their faces were twisted, like the distorted reflections in the mirrors, and they moved like puppets. Thomas realized they had become part of the maze. Desperate, he ran forward, but with every second, the maze began collapsing around him. The mirrors shattered into shards, and the reflections kept chasing him. He knew that if he didn't escape now, he would be trapped forever. When Thomas finally stumbled out of the maze, the carnival had changed. It looked abandoned and dark, as if it had never existed. Thomas was alone. Mike and Sarah were gone. He knew they would never come back. The third story is about Jennifer and her friend Linda. They decided to spend the evening at the carnival, which had appeared on the edge of town. Linda immediately felt something was wrong, but Jennifer insisted it would be fun. However, it quickly became clear that this carnival was anything but ordinary. The first ride they chose was the carousel. It had been their favorite since childhood, but this carousel was different. It began to spin too fast, and the girls found they couldn't get off. The lights flashed before their eyes, and the music grew louder and louder. When the carousel finally stopped, Jennifer and Linda found themselves in an empty carnival. The rides were abandoned, and the lights flickered dimly. They tried to find a way out, but no matter where they went, they always ended up back in the same place. Their only hope was the funhouse, which seemed less threatening compared to the other attractions. However, inside the funhouse, they didn't find funny mirrors or cheerful rooms, but creepy dolls that looked too much like real people. The dolls moved slightly, whispering their names. Linda tried to run, but the door slammed shut, trapping them inside. The further they went into the funhouse, the more it turned into a maze of terror. The dolls became more lifelike, and one of them suddenly reached out, grabbing Linda by the arm. She screamed, and the dolls began to move towards them. Soon they realized that the dolls were former people who had been trapped in the carnival and could never escape. They had become part of this eerie place. Jennifer and Linda knew they were next. The final story happened to teenagers Kevin, Emma, and Nate. Like the others, they decided to visit the carnival, which had appeared on an empty lot near their school. The three friends thought it would be a great way to have fun before exams. They had no idea this night would change their lives forever. The carnival seemed normal enough: bright lights, loud music, and a cheerful crowd. The friends bought tickets and started exploring the rides. Emma suggested they try the scariest attraction, the haunted house. A silent man in an old-fashioned costume and mask greeted them at the entrance, silently pointing them to the door inside. Once inside, they expected the usual decor with cheap scares, but from the first steps, something felt wrong. The corridors narrowed and the lighting dimmed. Emma, who led the way, suddenly stopped. In front of her, a message appeared on the wall. "Welcome to your worst fears," it was written in red paint, with droplets of blood dripping down the walls. At that moment, the doors behind them slammed shut, and the friends realized they were trapped. The corridors twisted and turned, growing more terrifying with each step. The walls were covered in strange images of people with distorted faces, and footsteps could be heard from around corners. Nate tried to open the door, but it seemed to have vanished, leaving them with no choice but to proceed deeper into the maze. Soon they encountered bizarre creatures, broken mannequins that moved with unnervingly realistic motions. They reached out their hands towards the friends, but couldn't come any closer. Kevin suggested they run, but every turn they took led them back to the same spot. The haunted house became an endless nightmare of fear and confusion. Panic set in as they saw a figure moving in the distance. It was the same masked man they had seen at the entrance, but now his movements were slow and menacing. He silently watched them, and every time they turned around, he seemed to be closer. Emma, unable to handle the tension any longer, screamed. Suddenly, the walls of the haunted house started to collapse. A long corridor appeared in front of them, lit by a dim light, leading to an old door. They raced towards it, hoping it was their escape. When they finally reached the door and opened it, they found not an exit, but another part of the carnival. This area looked different, ruined, with faded lights and broken attractions. They had ended up on the other side of the carnival, a place no visitor ever went. The same masked man stood before them, but now his face was visible. It was an old man with a horrifyingly twisted face and hollow eyes. He looked at them and said, "You thought it was just a game." No one leaves here. With those words, he vanished, leaving the friends alone with their terror. Kevin, Emma, and Nate realized they had entered a different reality where the carnival lived its own life. Everything around them was ghostly and threatening. They wandered among the broken attractions, seeing shadows of people who had once been there. When they reached the heart of this eerie place, they understood that their nightmare was just beginning. The night carnival is not just a place for amusement. It lures with its lights and attractions, but behind that facade is something much darker. Some lose friends, some end up in endless mazes of fear, and some become part of this eerie world. If you enjoyed these stories, subscribe to our channel and give us a like. If this video reaches 100 likes, We will share even more chilling tales of places best avoided at night. Leave your comments and share your own stories. Perhaps yours will be our next feature.